So I am absolutely delighted to introduce our next speakers who are going to be talking about soaring through the clouds and getting your cloud native approach right. You've heard from me some of those approaches, but really great to hear from Michael Tadault from Red Hat and Thomas Sennhauser from Intel, who are going to be taking us through that today. And if you've got any questions for them, please do put them into that Q&A box, as I know they're dying to hear from you. So Thomas, Michael, welcome to today.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for your time. I know during this challenging time, it's not so easy to get some time around for this kind of webinar. But I think really we have a great content with Red Hat together, which I think is really unique and will help in the journey. So my name is Thomas Sennhauser. I'm Director CT and running the business for Asia Pacific. I'm based in Singapore. Spent the last 25 years in Telco. That's why my gray hairs are already there. And with me is Michael, and I would like to give Michael also the introduction. Michael?
Thank you, Thomas. I also spent more than 20 years in the telco industry, and I think I'm soon to get your gray hair, but it's not yet there. So I hope to be able to delay that. Yeah, so yeah, spent many years in the telco industry, working for a mobile service provider, and then for network equipment providers like Alcatel, Lucent, Nokia. And about 10 years ago, I was involved in the first initiatives for telco cloud with the technology called NFV. And since I joined Red Hat, I've been continuing that journey, which is helping telco service provider, adopt cloud computing technologies, extend the telco cloud if they already have one to the edge with the things like vRAN, edge computing. At the same time, also, making their IT operations more agile and efficient by adopting cloud native, which is today's topics. So we'll give you, I would say, our view about what it means cloud native for telco service providers. So I'll start and then hand over to Thomas. So what is happening in the telco industry? Here are some of the trends. So of course everybody is talking about the advent of 5G, which has in fact some consequences both let's say in the 5G core network. So right now, you're probably aware that there is something called the non-standalone, which is moving to the standalone 5G core network, which will enable some of the really new use cases of 5G. And at the same time, the radio access network itself is also going towards the path of, let's say, disaggregation and virtualization. So we are hearing a lot of things about vRAN, but more importantly also OpenRAN. And at the same time, while the public cloud network is evolving and will enable much more more and more use cases. There are also use cases in remote area where there is no public network, and a lot of people are now talking about enabling private 5G or even 4G networks for specific industries. One of the key innovations that has yet to show its full effect is going to be a network slicing, which is to more specifically tailor a slice of the network for specific use cases. On one extreme, you have the very low latency use case, for example, to guide the car, and to the other extreme, you have massive, machine-to-machine communication, where a huge amount of devices, but with a low amount of data, can feed back this to the core of the network. And one of the key trends that we are highlighting is that there is now the opportunity to monetize the edge of the network. Today, what you have at the edge of the network is mainly used for providing, radio coverage. But the other trend that also Aaron mentioned, which is the advent of, data processing and artificial intelligence, in fact, means that more and more enterprises are going to want to leverage data. And in fact, simply the sheer amount of data that you are going to have will not make it possible to process everything in centralized public clouds, which is kind of more the current model. Okay, there is so much data to process that you have to do it more at the edge, which brings that I would say a kind of distribution of public clouds or of cloud computing in general from the center of the network where you have big public clouds to edge location where you do you distribute the processing, especially the machine learning inference at the edge of the network. So that's a very important trend. And at the same time, as the scale of the, let's say, of this network and the number of devices increase, and this was also highlighted by Aaron, there's an increased need for more and more automation, to manage this, this more extended and more complex network and service assurance. And also, as we are, it's very clear that we don't know exactly what is going to be the killer app for 5G. It's probably something more on the side of B2B than B2C. But this has yet to be found out what are the really successful application, but which means that there are a lot of, and again highlighted by Aaron, a lot of partnering has to happen. And I think it's the beginning of the age of experimentation. Telco service provider will have to partner with other players, industry verticals. They will have to find out, try some new applications, and then slowly find out which are the ones that are really relevant for consumers and enterprises. So if we look at the evolution of the network, it has taken a number of steps towards cloud native. So it started with something that I've experienced 10 years ago, which was the the beginning of telco clouds with the technology called NFV. But this was, I would say, an incomplete step towards cloud native, because the results were still very much verticalized, let's say, telco cloud stacks, which were not, truly horizontal platforms. And now, as the scale of the network increases, the number of potential use cases and edge computing is coming. I think all the players are recognizing it's time to really implement a truly horizontal, let's say, a telco cloud across the entire, let's say, telco landscape, whether it's on the network side or on the IT side. Okay, so therefore we have these, these major three imperatives that are coming. Cloud native, to sustain that age of experimentation. It's not possible to deploy an app you don't have 9 months or 18 months to develop an application and then try it out. You have to experiment very fast. So you need to adopt the cloud native development technologies. Edge computing, so extending the telco cloud from the center of the network to the edges of the network. And also very important, this has to be highly automated, especially if it's deployed all over the place with a fully automated application lifecycle management. So the tenets, let's say, of the cloud native approach is, first of all, partners. And I would say being able to work within, I would say, a multi-vendor ecosystem. We don't know what's going to be the killer app. It's going to be found through experimentation with different industry partners, different industry verticals. Okay, it's no longer a time where telco service provider have, I would say, know what the service is going to be. It's going to be through partnering. And this means that once you work with this partner on the left-hand side, you have also to, you have to experiment fast, because, you cannot waste time and spend too much time on doing the same thing and then find out, okay, there is no market for that. So this means enable new services with velocity, and also maybe with smaller, let's say with smaller scale, not the full-fledged service which has all the features, but rather try incremental approach. And typically, that's the cloud native development approach, adding more features, made a minimal viable product, little by little, instead of trying to develop the perfect application from the first time, With Edge, there is a big, there's a big, let's say, challenge of scalability. Potentially, a successful application can then be deployed on, let's say, hundreds or even thousands of sites. So this needs to be fully controlled and managed, at the same time delivering performance. And also the blue box, this has to be done with, with the full visibility and control, because we expect 5G to become, let's say, the fabric of, the fabric of our life more and more. The pandemic has shown that, telecommunication is integral to our life, and more so with 5G. So this network has to be enable features, at high velocity, because telco service provider need to experiment. But at the same time, once a use case is valid, it has to be rock solid and ultra reliable. Okay, and in fact, cloud native enables that that paradox between feature velocity, but also quality at the same time. So these are not, things that you cannot do at the same time. And now I give it over to Thomas.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I mean, as Michael said, it's a journey. We, it started with NFV, and we are today what you see, more in this kind of private, public cloud, multi-hyper clouds, and of course virtualization, which is quite happen today. In the future, what we see, which will happen, is more in this kind of multi-cloud orchestration, that you have really multiple clouds, and orchestration, I think, is one of the critical paths to be successful. So the automation is super critical, to achieve that. And then, in a longer term, we see even distributed cloud, and again, you see also edge. So the future is really, seamless around the infrastructure, where it is, where it's running. It's really, everything is kind of a big cloud. That doesn't mean there will be no workload, which is running on premise. There will be always things you will run on a premise versus a public cloud piece, but there will be a balance between the different approaches. Next one, Michael. The other part, I think, is we talk about, and I think one of the challenges in NFV was that the software stack was not adopted or not changed quite as it is. And I think with cloud native, as shared before, it's not only, of course, you can put your traditional application into a container and move it, to a kind of a cloud environment. But end of the day, you really need to rewrite your application, cut it in smaller services, business logical point, so that you really get, more agile approach from an application point of view. And then again, it starts with, with the automation, what you see on the right side, resilience, all this kind of native key principle you need to put into it when you want to go into cloud native. And then on the other side, on the left side, you see the lifecycle management. And again, automation, I would say, if you ask me today, and we come in the next slide a bit about our lesson learned, but I think the lifecycle management orchestration part is a critical success to run that whole cloud native approach into the long run for that. And again, the key thing is really, with cloud native, that's a journey. So you cannot switch the things from one day to the other. You need to plan. You need to work with your partners together, with your development team, and have a roadmap and move it step by step into that. Next slide, Michael, please. So the things, what we learned from other verticals, because, the telco, to be fair, is not, from a cloud point of view, maybe not the, ahead of the curve or at the edge end of the day. In the telco, we were a little bit more, I would say, conservative, maybe a little bit slower, because our business in general is also a little bit more complex. We have a lot of legal governance, regulator issues around it. I think that was one of the reasons why, we talk today about cloudification versus, in the enterprise traditional IT business, they may be ahead of the curve 2-3 years ago, which they started already with that. But I think, the learning, and of course, we also see telco operators today already have that, and partners who are running that. So one of the key learnings I really think is the strategy and planning. It's really super critical, to really have a solid plan around your strategy. Where do you start? And again, not all workload, will be able to have, to run in a full-blown cloud, in a public cloud. A lot of them will run in, I call it a telco cloud. So one of the things is really make a planning about, what are the type of workloads you really want to move into a cloud environment, and is that a public premise cloud? So this kind of things you need to please. The other part is, as usual, we are normally technical people, we like all this new technology stuff, but in the end, there has to be a finance tick in a box. Just doing it to have done it, I think will not be successful. So again, there is a lot of reason why the TCO and the ROI of a cloud native environment in the long term, will be payable. But I think you need really to look at specific from your own environment. And again, every environment, every operator is a little bit different. So it's really good advice, to plan that part of the planning, not to forget, the finance part. The other part is really, and I think that's where we are struggling a little bit in the industry. For us in the telco industry, before it was, we roll out, a network and the function were there, and we resell literally this function, which was hard-coded into the network. Now we're talking about, new services, and Michael said, the killer application. What is the killer application? And I agree, we don't know that yet today, but we are sure there is something, which is coming with this new with this new world, with the 5G, where we're in 2-3 years we see, which is maybe not one single killer application, but with multiple key drivers, which really generate revenue for the operator. But I think the key thing, what we don't have in general, we have network expert, we have application manager teams, but what we need to be really look into is the talent. How do we manage this new development? How do we manage this new life cycle management? How much do we want to deploy by ourselves? And I think it was said in previous, ecosystem is also critical. How do you work with partner together? Because you don't have to do everything by yourself, but how do you open up your network? How do you collaborate with others, with smaller partners, with application vendors, with software developers, but also with the CSP together. So I think that's really something I think which is critical. And then, as I said already, the workload and use case is definitely the right guidance how you should start with that journey of cloud native as a journey on that side. With that, I will go back to Michael for the next slide.
Thank you, Thomas. So yeah, let's take the example of something that's quite new, which is edge computing, edge applications, and how does this what's the consequence? Why is more detailed cloud native needed there? So first of all, if I'm if I'm a developer, or even I'm an industry vertical, I'm not quite sure what's going to be the perfect application for the edge. So here you have a depiction of the landscape. So you have, of course, the network, the extreme edge with the devices. You have what is called the telco, let's say the telco edge, with the radio antenna, and then still, to host application, you have the choice between private clouds and public clouds. So I'm a developer, I'm thinking about writing an edge application. I'm not sure about it. It's an untested market. So obviously, if I start today, I'm going to start with what is on the top left, which is cloud native application development. I'm going to base my development on preferably probably containers, because that's kind of technology that enables me to quickly change the application, adapt it to the market, and release features faster. Okay. But then put yourself in the shoes of the developer. Maybe I'm starting this, let's say in in Singapore. But maybe I'm kind of more multinational, and my application is is valid as well for Malaysia, for for China, for Australia, okay. But then I don't want to make adaptations and do integration work whenever I deploy this application in every different carrier's edge network. So therefore, the second thing that is very important with the cloud native principle is that ideally I have I have application or workload portability, which means I develop once and I can deploy anywhere. Okay, so because although I'm talking about edge application, in reality, an application is never going to be just at the edge. It's going to be part of of a greater outcome, that requires potentially, part of the application to be hosted in the center of the network, for example, in in public clouds or in private clouds. And while other part of the application is going to be deployed at the edge. So let me just give you an example. If we are talking about things, around, let's take the example of video analytics. Video analytics, you have to put it at the edge. There is no way that you can, you can take video feeds and backhaul this towards, the center of a network, towards public clouds or even private clouds. So the processing, let's say, of the images and decision making based on video feeds has to be local. There's no choice about that. However, when you want to develop the machine learning model, because before you can apply it, using inference, you have to develop the machine learning model. Then you need to use public clouds or private clouds because it's cheaper there. There you have tons of GPUs to do your machine learning. You can experiment with the model. Okay, so this means that as an application developer, I'm going to have pieces of my application running at the edge, in a very constrained environment, and some other pieces like the machine learning development, which can run in private clouds or public clouds, and therefore the portability of a workload across all these different footprints is absolutely essential. Okay. The other thing that is potentially very important is also that some of these edge application, although they have been maybe developed with the support of the center of the network, they must run, in some use cases which are mission critical. Which, when you're talking about, for example, industrial use cases, these use cases have to run even when the public clouds and the rest of the network disappears or gets disconnected. Okay. So the autonomous operations of the app at the edge is also something very important. And of course, the thing that we have in the middle, as part of this cloud native application development, and this fast, feature rollout, looking for the right features for the network, and something that a skill that let's say telco service providers don't have yet so much is, of course, the continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline, which in fact they can take from the IT industry. So to conclude, so what are, let's say, Red Hat and Intel doing together to usher this new area of cloud native? So first of all, in the past, and this is kind of mostly done, we have collaborated on a number of open source projects and also standardization bodies to enable cloud native, let's say, technologies, which are primarily coming from the IT industry, to adapt these technologies for the telco industry. Okay, so there are things like in Kubernetes, in containers that we have enabled together in the upstream communities, in the cloud native foundations, which is enabling, for example, multiple network interfaces on the container, hardware accelerations. Therefore, you see things like SRV, etc. on this slide. Okay, so this was all about influencing these open source projects so that they take into account the requirements of the telco industry. Okay. The other thing that, of course, both Intel and Red Hat are doing is that while all this innovation, software innovation, is coming, almost entirely from open source projects, as a telco service provider, you want to minimize risk, and therefore, in fact, we are doing together a lot of work towards making these, let's say, these technologies risk-free. So, of course, on the one hand, you have Red Hat, who is offering, let's say, open source software, but with enterprise and telco support, long life cycle, and Intel on its side, who is developing, for example, let's say reference architecture, so they can be quickly adopted by by partners, by telco service providers. And lately, what we are also doing to accelerate the movements towards cloud native, we are working together on, let's say, the validation and the certification of CNFs. So what are CNFs? CNFs are network workloads which are containerized. So one way to call it is cloud native network functions in opposition to the virtualized network function, the VNFs. So we have built together, let's say, a certification lab and validation lab in New Mexico in the United States, and we're doing this also in other labs across the globe. So we are helping ISVs, network ISVs, to certify, their workloads on cloud native, platforms like the one offered by Red Hat. So together we are, our objective is to bring more confidence in these technologies by, by doing pre-integration testing, validation, and then offering this to our, the entire telco partner ecosystem, so they can deploy this more quickly, and put this into production faster.
No, thanks, Michael. I think you summarized it really great. I think I think we are here, to help, and I think with Red Hat together, we really driving this journey, and super happy, to help. So reach out to us, and let's engage, and we can share also, what we learned together. And I think the other part, maybe to highlight, is really the certification lab, what we are doing, helping to certify and onboard on the right stack. So I think that's definitely something I think we are looking for. And yeah.
Well, Thomas, Michael, thank you for such a great presentation. The sun's finally rising here, or starting to, in London. So it was a great presentation, and definitely woke the sun up over here. I have loads of questions to ask you from that presentation, but time unfortunately is short. But we do have a question from the audience, so please stay with us while we go here. We've got a great question from Mohammed Fahim Momen, who asks, well, with LTE onwards, radio access networks become greatly centralized. However, will telco edge increase cost and complexities related to network infrastructure, network dimensioning, planning, and also operations? And I think that's a really important question, isn't it? How do you manage the complexities of the edge? And I think you showed that, Thomas, Michael, with all the different, vendor partners as well involved in that.
I mean, from my point of view, as we try to share, of course, there is a certain level of complexity which is coming with container, because it's getting more complex, because some of that can run anywhere in your network. You not even know it at the moment, where the service is running. I think that gives a certain, from an operational point of view, I think something we really need to look into to make sure, the monitoring, the dashboards are available for the operational people to understand that. And then the other aspect is, kind of the zero touch fulfillment assurance things. You need to make sure that you really can automate that complexity, because if you really have a full-blown cloud native environment, you cannot manage that anymore in a manually. So you need to have this automation to a high level of degrees, really deployed and execute. So in NFV, there was always few people who try to overcome the things with some of the automation and the NFVI, and that was possible because it was still VM's big chunk of it. But again, with cloudification, the limit is it will not work that way. So I think definitely that. I mean, Michael, you want to add some?
Yeah, I just wanted to add. So when we go into this, telco edge, we are not saying that we are going to change, let's say, the level of distribution or centralization of the radio access network. That very much depends, on how much fiber you have, how much you can do, a BBU pooling, this kind of thing. So we are not going to change that. The fundamental idea is that instead of having, let's say, silos, it makes sense to have a common, underlying telco cloud platform. Okay. Although, let's say, from an operational point of view, it's going to be more challenging at the beginning, because you are used to, of course, in the radio access network, to a vertical model with one vendor, one region. The benefit of putting below this radio access network function a horizontal telco cloud edge is to enable, this use case of edge computing. Okay, you are not going to be able to enable that edge computing use case if you have too many disparate and different platforms. It needs to be a unified, let's say, computing platform that enables this, this workload portability from the public clouds, private clouds, towards the edge clouds. And I would say the impact on the I don't see a great impact on centralization or distribution of the RAN, but you are going to have, in some of the aggregation point of the radio access network, you're going to distribute your mobile core first, And this is where you're going to have these pockets at the beginning, pockets of edge computing to put this B2B, application that, that will enable and make the 5G really useful. Okay. But I wouldn't say that there is, let's say, unless you're trying to, of course, to do this super ultra low latency, and then you need to decentralize this computing very close to the radio antenna, yes, then it will have an impact on the centralization of the network. But I think we need to find a balance, and probably the first use cases are not going to be around, necessarily the super low latency that would require, a very aggressive distribution and change in centralization of the network.
I think it's all about the use cases. You're right to see, where we start with. Thomas, Michael, thank you so much. They were really great presentations.